You're listening to The Conversation with Model Mind AI, a weekly check-in with Angela Schultz and Loren Horsager on how to lead through change, stay curious, and get AI ready.
Welcome to The Conversation. I am Angela Schultz, and today we're exploring how AI can give your business a competitive edge. Think of it as a marathon. There's tension of getting started, the response required to push through the middle, and the future that defines the finish line. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Loren Horsager. Welcome, Loren.
Hey, Angela, it's great to be back. And I know we've missed a couple of weeks, so vacations and it's been crazy, but we are excited to be back. I think we have a few episodes coming up that are going to be fun to do. So,
Agreed. It's good to be back. In regards to our conversation today, so if AI strategy really is a marathon, what would you say is the hardest mile at the start? What trips leaders up in the middle? And how do you know when we've crossed the finish line? So maybe we'll break this down piece by piece. Let's start at the beginning, the starting line. How do we really measure ROI? Like, there's got to be a motivation for somebody to make space for AI, to learn about AI, and to really invest in AI.
yeah, I think that's you stated that really well because the challenge that we hear about from people that have implemented AI or that are trying to implement it, we get a lot of interesting questions and answers. So we did a session about a month ago that we did basically just took questions from business leaders of what they've experienced, and I think it's pretty interesting from the people that had actually tried to implement stuff. A lot of stuff has failed, right? So what does that mean in a world where, we don't really treat failure very well? But I think it's interesting. We live in a time where the cost of implementing something is so low to actually prove out an idea that it's worth the learning process that we're getting out of that in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases to actually go through the process to figure this out. When, it used to be, hey, we're going to roll out a new product to do something internally, and, it's going to take us 6 to 12 months or something and hundreds of thousands of dollars, where now it's like, you know what, if I let my team focus on this for an afternoon, they can develop something. We can have a proof of concept running and see if this is actually going to work, right? And it's truly, we can prove out a lot of ideas that quickly. And then to productionize them might still take a little bit of effort, but it's still not going to take months and months. Generally, it's going to take, on the AI side of it, it's not going to take that long. Maybe like to compile data and things like that, it'll take longer. But it's really about rethinking our mindset when it comes to failure and how to plan for this. So I guess if we're thinking about ROI, then it's really about what I would measure ROI by is how much are we learning and how much are we trying? Because ultimately AI is going to be critical to every one of our business. So are we getting to where we need to get? And when we talk, there's lots of things that we're very excited that AI is going to be able to do that it can't do very well today, right? And one of those things is agents, which we talk about a lot. But the game has just come a long way in the last, we're about a week and a half from when OpenAI released Agent Builder. And we'll talk more about this over the next weeks and months. But the tools are really where the challenge is. And so we need to have familiarity with the AI because the AI got no better than it is today. It can do most of what we want it to do. We need these tools to continue to improve to actually be able to do what we want and work with them the way we want to work with them. But that's happening now. So we have to be aware and up to date as those tools are changing and trying it and figuring out how it applies to our business and how we can get value out of that. So I think the number one thing to measure right now is what did we do? What did we try? What was the success rate on that? And don't expect 100% in the short term, but also expect it at a very, very, very low cost. And basically treat that as education because you're going to have some education going into this as we get up to speed, but that education becomes more and more valuable as we get down the path. and especially by having that education across multiple people in your organization or multiple teams in your organization, right?
Hmm. I like the word awareness. I think by providing your company with even just some baseline, let's say you get a team account in ChatGPT, which is what, $20, $30 a person per month. I mean, that's a pretty low investment. So, but you're able to get your team on board. And so many people right now are inundated by the word AI. AI is here, AI is there. But the more people I talk to, they really don't have an understanding of what it is or how it can be used for them in the workplace to kind of enhance their experience at work and open up more doors than they maybe had before. So I do think the return on investment is not only for your company, but for your employees' experience and knowledge. So you can kind of bring them along. So if that's the case, then what is the risk? You're encouraging people to not come in too hot, right? Start somewhere. You don't want to burn out. If we use this marathon metaphor, you don't want to set your pacing for the first mile to go too fast. You want to think sustainability, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, you have to consider you've got to at least sign up for the race and start running, because the risk of falling behind I see is more of a high risk scenario than maybe fumbling along the way for the first couple miles. So what are some of the risks you see of people kind of in this wait and see mindset?
Yeah, and I think that that wait and see mindset has been okay up to, pretty recently, but
Mm,
now there's so much changing and there's so much that we can do with AI that if you're not, your competitors are doing it. So what are they doing that, how are they changing their business to be more efficient, to be more cost effective? I think there's all these areas that we're going to see radical changes in. I was having a conversation with a law firm recently, and they're like, they have customers that want them to use AI in everything. They have customers that don't want them to use AI in anything. They want to figure out how to charge differently for AI processes, but it's going to completely impact their team and how they deliver things. And so, if they're not doing it now, even though the answer might not be obvious today, you have to start down this path because a lot of businesses, their business model is going to change, right?
mhm.
So I was talking to a software development company the other day, and they're like, well, maybe we need to go from time and materials to, fixed bid project cost. And I think that's really interesting. I'm like, probably should have done that a long time ago, but ultimately, I think it's going to change the way these businesses work and the way what business model they're using. So you have to start down this path to learn so you can actually make those decisions smartly.
And I would throw a word of caution out that I just had a training last week, and it was on Copilot specifically, Microsoft Copilot. And there was maybe some negative connotation and some past history with not being that impressed with what it had to offer. And I really had to kind of talk about this tipping point where pre summer 2025, Copilot was a bit underwhelming for me. And then when this summer hit and they rolled out all the new updates and features, so if you've tried it a year ago, try it again.
Yeah.
So you really need to kind of keep at it and be aware of the updates, because Microsoft Copilot now versus 6 months ago is a completely different tool than it was. So even if you had an early start, come back to it and see what it can do for you now.
I think it's pretty funny because you came in the one day and you're like, "Oh, Copilot's my favorite," and we're like, "What?" Like nobody expected that. So,
Yeah,
I think they're all changing, right? And
they are.
now Copilot's an interesting animal because not only is it the AI, but it's also the tool set around it,
Mhm.
right? Because it's all the Office integration. So it's interesting. The AI didn't it actually improved slightly for Copilot, but the tools and the way it integrates with the tools improved drastically this summer. So
Mhm.
that's how it changed. And again, it goes back to the AIs are actually good enough. They're going to keep getting better, but the tools around them are where there's so much room to continue to grow. But it also there has been massive improvements. A little change can actually have a radical improvement in how we can actually execute things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, good. Well, that brings me to my next question then. So we always talk about AI strategy. So should AI strategy sit with IT, operations, executive team? Like whose responsibility is it to really push this and make space for changes within the way we operate?
Yeah. I think a lot of this depends on the size of your organization. So we see, mid-sized companies, 100 million plus size companies, up to multi-billion dollar companies. They will be really, most of them are focused on building out centers of excellence around AI. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good approach. In a very small business, it's, if you have 5 people in your company, well, that becomes hard. It's like everybody is probably involved, or most people are involved to some degree. What we say for a lot of the companies we work with that are kind of that 5 to 500 person company, what we recommend is when you're getting started is pick a group of like 5 people across the organization, some IT, but not really all IT. But IT needs to lead the security part of this because you're going to make decisions on how you're going to secure this. But you also need people on the business side who are thinking about what is the value, what and the ROI for actually building things, and what are those high value things that we could build and could try and could actually have a big impact on our organization. So you need a variety of people, but I would start with a fairly tight group of people that are really focused on the strategy of how you're going to implement AI in your organization. We say keep it around maybe 5 to 7, and then grow from there. So the great thing about having all these people in different areas in the company is now they can go back, and now we're seeing once they get trained, they bring it back and they have a session every week with their teams, say, hey, here's what I learned. Here's what we're going to try. Do people have suggestions? Do other people want to get involved? And it starts to expand out. Now, if let's say you have a 100 person company, you start with this team of 5, but now you say, oh, over here in this group, we've come up with an idea and we have a team of 5 people that's going to lead it for this group. And you start to expand and expand and expand. And it all rolls up to kind of this AI strategy team. The other thing that's really important out of this is to have executive buy-in and executive promotion of this,
Mm-hmm.
all the way from like getting trained and sharing this and integrating it into meetings and integrating it into events that you're having and processes that you're working with. Um, Now, I think it's funny. We go to a lot of meetings with clients, and it'll be like the executive team minus the CEO, and they're like, "Hey, the CEO said we have to roll out AI, and we don't have a clue what we're doing. How do we do that?" And I think it's funny because like you have to participate in the process, and there's not like a quick answer exactly for this stuff. So there's work that goes into doing a good job of rolling out AI. But again, you can't really go wrong. You just have to keep changing it. So what are the expectations that you're rolling up to your leadership team or your board or whoever you're reporting to? Because that's where the miscommunication is sometimes of, oh, I thought we were rolling out AI, and here's what we've delivered on, and well, maybe it kind of worked, but it didn't really hit the ROI numbers we're working. You're going to have these projects that, especially some of your first ones, are going to be very cheap to do, but you're going to get a proof of concept that maybe it doesn't scale when it goes into production quite as well as you wanted it to, but you can build on that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to approach these differently. You need the leadership buy-in to promote this, but then you need people out there actually working towards. So what I think the best solution is when your leadership team is focused on, hey, we want people that are committed to helping figure this out, and now you have to come back and tell us what's needed. And we have to figure out who are we going to train? How are we going to train them? What are we going to try for projects and be open to those trying those things? I worked with a company that they basically came back and everything that came back was let's try this, let's try that. And management said no. It's like, well, we want to implement AI, but we're not going to actually do it in any way that makes sense. And they're like, unless we see a certain level of ROI. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get to that ROI in the first project because there's a learning curve to actually
Mm-hmm.
make this work in your organization.
I see that all the time in class when I have multiple departments from the same company in the room together. I see them kind of in this journey together, and it's such a great exercise for a company because I see these like aha moments of like, oh, that's what you do. Oh, well, here I can do this to help you, or I could really use help in this regard. But they connect and they understand what each department is really focused on and aligned, and the journey, of course, is such a big part of it. So I think there's a lot of value add having this common focus, but yet learning how to apply and interact with one another can be really beneficial. And that
Right.
may not show up in the project per se, but it's going to show up in your culture of your company. And then think of all that is now kind of a baked in knowledge of one another, and they're able to build off of that going forward. So really great opportunities to have those cross team conversations when learning a tech like AI
Yep.
can be
And
valuable.
and I would say, forget that it's a tech. Let
Right.
your IT people remember that it's a tech because you got to have security and stuff. But forget that it's a tech and that, when we train and when we talk, it's so much unlike a technology, and how we approach a lot of parts of this should be unlike a technology. When we're building out a project, it is usually a more like a tech project, and we are implementing technology. But so much of the process of actually figuring this out is very unlike implementing a technology. It's more like hiring a person, right?
True, true. And as we wrap up kind of this initial part of the race of the marathon where the first is always the worst, I heard a great analogy that I've been leaning into lately is the first pancake. No matter how hard you try, that first pancake always turns out just awful. But the second and the third, like once you can get past that pain point, and I recognize that in running specifically, the first mile is just everything hurts, nothing feels good. You never think you can make it another mile. But once you get into kind of the rhythm, and you've ironed out some of the wrinkles along the way, let's focus on the middle. So, this is kind of the sustainability. So, we've started up our AI marathon. And now we're to the point where we really want to know, like, can AI shape the innovation pipeline? Like, what what can we really do to kind of find our pacing without wasting so much energy like we did at the beginning?
Yeah. I think there are so many things that we can do that really help us uh, expand how we think about things. So the strategy part of this, I think people leave off a lot of times that AI is not good at that. I think it's very good at that. One of the things we're working on, so we're working on all this agent stuff, right? And how to
Mm,
build agents, how to build different types of agents, how to explain that to people. One of them that I think is really fun that we're working on is to build a board of advisors agent, right? So a bunch of agents that have different perspectives and different parts of the skills of being on a board on your organization. And it's very interesting that now you can have a dialogue with them, feed them the information about your organization, have a dialogue that is incredibly powerful to actually work through the problems you have. So, we work with a lot of organizations that are on traction or EOS, and I think, so you take your weekly issues and use the board of advisors as kind of a way to think through a problem. It is such a powerful process to help us do that. But that same thing then helps you keep expanding that out into, or maybe it's refining it down into the different areas of actually creating new ideas, creating new value with what you're providing. One of the things we're going to be talking about here is how does this disrupt my industry and my company potentially? But I think it's going to change a lot of organizations. We potentially need to change our business models to match that, and the AI can help us think about that to some degree and help us strategize on how we might approach that. So it's an interesting thing to start developing, like your ability to work with AI from a strategic perspective.
That you teed me up perfectly. In our 201 Microsoft Copilot class, where I teach people kind of best practices of how to build a Microsoft Copilot agent, the first category I always start with, I call them operational agents because they're very task focused, skill focused. It's like it's what do you want the agent to do? Right. And that's a
Mhm.
great starting point. But once we get past that, then we get into strategic agents because those are the ones that are going to help you think through decision making, planning, giving that point of view reference, all that type thing. So I agree. Start with having Copilot or ChatGPT do something for you. And then once you get comfortable with that, then people are more at ease when it comes to asking for decision making, planning, that type of thing, kind of a higher level. And to me, that's the value of these products is that thinking partner, right? So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
interesting because you're talking about a different agent than I am. This is kind of the precursor to what you're developing, but all of this is part of the marathon. Like you have to go through
Yes.
each of these miles to really get to that finish line and have a good understanding. So I think that's interesting that sometimes I feel like we speak the same language, even though we're coming at it from two
Yeah.
very different perspectives,
Well,
non-technical and technical.
I think it's interesting that all this builds on like we have our classes designed a certain way. We have these conversations in a certain way because there is a it's steps that we're building on, right? So it's just like going through math in school. You were a math teacher. You don't start with calculus and then go to, addition and subtraction. We build on that the other way around to actually because it makes sense and then it's applicable.
Mhm.
And so that's what we're doing here. It's like start with chat, start with the tools you're using, then get into how to build custom GPTs, custom copilots, and then we're getting into more advanced things like workflows and agents. And it's building down that path and even getting into like custom models for things, right? So I
Mhm.
think it's a path that you have to get on, and you don't quite know right now what's going to be the most valuable part that actually applies to your business, but you have to get on that path. And as you go down that process, it will be valuable very quickly. You
Mhm.
just don't know where the really, really big value is going to be. But you're going to benefit almost immediately from any like your next step. We
Mhm.
see that constantly. But then there's usually like a big game changer for a business that it's like, we're going to change business models and do this. Those big things take more time, but you have to start down the path to even figure out what they are.
Yeah. I just had a group come through and they finished the first two classes and their final statement to me is we always do a reflection at the end and they were like, I think I'm going to understand when Loren talks to me now. And I thought, oh, perfect. That's all I wanted to achieve. Like, I wanted you to get to a certain level where it was like, it doesn't matter what the conversation is, you can follow along now. So I was happy that he was able to
I'm not
play
sure what that
along.
says about
That's
me,
always
but
good.
that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it just highlights the fact that we're not siloed anymore, right?
Mhm.
This generative AI is really bringing people together that may not have been in a conversation together before. But now it's like we can each bring our gifts to the table. And it really, I think it just creates a better product in the end, is
Yeah.
the ability to kind of have everybody together.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question then is are companies that applying AI, and I'm going to include AI for startups in here as well, a threat to established players in the industry?
100% and 100% across the board, right? Because so what's happening is let's just take some different industries and kind of talk through this. There are so many different areas where it's the people that are applying AI have an advantage. So I don't
Mhm,
care if you're a marketing company and we work with a marketing company. They're pretty against using AI to write marketing content, but they're using it in a whole bunch of other areas of their business, right?
mhm,
And it's like you get to pick how you're going to apply this and what's important from you as like everybody has a perspective of like why they do what they do and how they do what they do. And in their case, they don't want to use it for content creation, but they're going to use it heavily for reporting and data analytics and automations and things like that, right? So that's what's fun about this is we get to figure that out. But if we look at these different industries, look at software development. We're just talking about what's the right model for software development going forward. On that note, we just launched our course for AI for software developers last week, and
Mhm.
hugely successful. But I think it's interesting that is radically changing the software world. In some ways, good. In some ways, maybe not so good. It's a lot harder to find a job as a software developer now because we don't need as many of them. And it also has changed like what a software developer does to some degree. So a software developer, there was a survey out recently that talked about how, most senior software developers just babysit the AI now. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the negative way of saying it. But the positive way of looking at that is I think when I'm coding, it's way more fun and enjoyable because I'm focused on solving the problem I'm trying to deliver on. And the AI is just the tool set to help do that. So rather than me
Mhm.
spending as much time actually writing code and trying to figure out every little detail in the code, the AI is actually doing that. I'm thinking about how do we look at this more holistically? What is the problem we're trying to solve, right? So I think it's changing how so many of these roles are working. Law firms, we mentioned that again as well, right? So how is this changing your business model? How are you going to have to charge for legal work going forward? How can you legally change that, and how do you what's your best business model to make that work, right? So all of these things that the AI is going to change what it takes to do some of these tasks. So some of them are going to, the value and the cost expectation is going to drop significantly. So you have to be able to manage that in your business. But then it's going to change. Like if you have an AI tool that actually helps do something more sophisticated than your competitor, you're probably going to gain more business than they are. And so there's all of these opportunities to look for and find new tools, new opportunities, new products because of AI, as well as then change like what is the team we need to do that. Like if you have smart people that are really good at the execution of what you're doing. We've been talking to a company about potentially taking, they have all this scientific data. Can we take that data and provide some AI tools on top of it? They can actually go sell that to their competitors as a way to
Mhm.
best practice how to do these processes in their industry, right? So
Mhm.
there's lots of ways of looking at this, and it depends on your business, but there's a lot of opportunity. It is going to change, and you have to have that mindset, and you have to be looking for where you can change it. And then as you're making like business model changes, it's probably a bit of a scary thing in some cases because it can be radical changes. But it's kind of the Kodak moment, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, are you going to survive or not when digital photography comes around? When Kodak was a massive, massive company prior to that, and
Mhm.
so we have to think about things like where is this going, and we have to start to participate in order to figure that out.
Okay, I've got a positive story for you.
Excellent.
So there's an NBA team, and they had four employees that were completely dedicated to fan communication. So they were stuck behind a computer, emailing fans, responding to conversations that fans of the team had. And so they implemented some AI strategies, and they were able to really kind of expedite that process. And so what used to take four people 5 days a week, they were able to kind of synchronize that into a single day, and that left them 4 extra days. But rather than reducing the employees, they kind of capitalized on it. And now those same four employees, 4 days a week, are out giving fans what they're calling experiences. So, kind of behind the scenes tours, and they're developing all these really great fan engagement experiences for people. They're
Hmm.
happier at their job, but they're
Yep.
still communicating and doing um, the initial work that they were hired for. But now they have all this extra time, and they've really capitalized and kind of elevated their fan experiences. So there's a positive spin on how AI can alleviate some of the pain points, but open up for new experiences.
I love that story. I haven't heard that. That's
Yeah,
fantastic. I think that's so interesting because it's like the goal for most people is not to reduce, headcount. The goal is
right.
to be more efficient and grow, right? And so
Yes.
that's a good example of that. So now, how do you more effectively use your team? The other thing that came out of that story for me is I think people that are using AI, generally, there's some exceptions to this, but most of the time, they actually leave work feeling happier about their
Mhm.
job and what they're doing. Part for a couple different reasons, I think, but it would be fun to talk to some psychologists about this at some point. But I think partially because it's a human process. So everything you're doing
Mhm.
is a human process. But in some ways, you don't have the frustration of interacting with a human in the sense that, and I don't mean that real negatively, but in the
Right.
sense that if someone's busy, they're not going to get back to you right away. Well, if I ask the AI, I get back to it right now, right? And so things like that, that I can have an ongoing experience with something that I feel good about, and it's making me more productive at the same time. So I'm getting a result that's actually helpful while having a better experience doing it. I think it's really an interesting change that's happening. I know the days that I'm using AI heavily, I actually get done and I'm way more relaxed, and I just feel better than the days that I'm like hardcore doing task kind of stuff.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. I even on a smaller scale, I think of my nephew just got a job working in a hardware store for the first time. And of course, he's young and doesn't know all there is to know about plumbing and electric. And I almost want him to take one of our classes to know how to use ChatGPT. So I think he's feeling a bit frustrated because he's not able to help the customers as much as he would like to, or he feels insufficient. And that's a hard feeling to be in for 8 hours a day, right? So if you had this outlet or this way that you could even together with the customer make some
Yeah.
decisions and some inquiries, it would be interesting. So I think
Well,
it's such a unique tool.
we're kind of going down a tangent here, but I think it's really interesting that one of the so one thing that he could do is actually use chat to go out and build a plan to learn some of these things, right? Which I
Yes.
think is really cool. That's one of the things I do usually when I'm done every day. I tell chat to make a 100-page report or whatever I'm looking for on a topic of something that I'm trying to learn, and then I get it,
Mhm.
it runs for sometimes hours, and then I come in the morning and I have this report to read, and that's how I start my days, which is a great way to start your
Mhm.
day. um, but it's also, we hear a lot from younger employees who are just out of college potentially, and they they really are uncomfortable asking their boss questions, probably more so than previous generations. I don't know why that is, but um, they don't want to ask a stupid question. And
Mhm.
so they are learning to use AI to actually help them navigate the workplace in a much more productive way. So, again, if we can provide them the tools that already have the
Mhm.
knowledge in around their job that they can interface with, and now when they go talk to their boss, you can get right to the point of here's what we need to do, here's how we do it. It's a much more productive process, but
Mhm.
it's also a much more enjoyable process for everybody.
Okay, now I can't wait for prompt of the week because this aligns perfectly to what we're talking about. So, let's wrap up these last few questions and then we'll tie back to the prompt of the week, which will help both the manager, the supervisor, and the employee kind of work through both sides of that. So, just to bring this marathon to a close, we've got the finish line is within reach. So
Mhm.
now we're at the end of the race. How do I future proof against AI models or tools that are quickly becoming obsolete? And I think I want to attach to that. Besides becoming obsolete, the rapid pace at which they are changing, whether that be a user interface change, a feature change. So there's kind of two sides to that coin. What if they become obsolete, and what if they are changing as well?
Um, they're not going to become obsolete in the same, like the AIs aren't going to become obsolete in the same way that we think of software. However, there was a big issue recently, and the API structure changed. So you think about like the UIs can change. You go to ChatGPT, and it's minor changes. You figure it out when you come back in, right? Not a big deal. But when we plug this into an automated system, now that becomes a problem if the
Mhm.
APIs, the interfaces to that change. And so that's what happened recently with OpenAI. And I think it- it's a super easy fix in this case, and it's just a minor tweak to get it to use the different models. Partially because some of the models were hard coded in some of these systems, which that's actually not a great, like you need to be able to make that adjustable. But that's just a like learning to code for that better. Um,
Mhm.
so I think there's a low risk of the models going away because you can just upgrade to the new model generally. You just have to have designed your system to be able to do that. Now,
Mhm.
when we talk about the tools, I think there's a couple things that we should think about with tools. One is um, if you're going to go implement a tool, make sure you have a problem and that's the right fit for it. Because what we're seeing is there are tools coming out constantly. And I get asked from a lot of business owners, like I get asked, 10 times a day, I want to come sell you this tool. And I would be very, very cautious around that for a couple reasons. One is that tool needed? Is it necessary? And in the past, you would never create your own tools in-house generally. Well, now the cost of doing that, we're working with a lot of clients who we're not
Mhm.
doing the project for them. We're just giving them some guidance, but they're building out their own tools in-house because even if you go implement a solution, you're still going to have to actually figure out how to integrate that solution, which is going to be very costly. There with AI now, you can potentially build your whole solution exactly how you want it from the ground up in maybe the same amount of time and effort, and you then can customize that, and you're not paying someone else long-term fees to do that. So, not that that's always the case, but there's a lot of cases where you can get a much better customized tool by building it yourself. So then there's the
Definitely.
tools of like, okay, we went like all the normal tools you use, like your ERP system, your CRM system, those tools you're going to continue to use because you're embedded in their platform, probably, right?
Mhm.
Well, those are the tools that you really need to start thinking about. Like, is this the right tool for us? And is there a concern there that we need to migrate over? One of the concerns we've seen some is like, hey, our ERP system doesn't have AI embedded in it. Well, if they have a good API, you can potentially get around that and build your own interfaces in front for where you need some AI capabilities. But all these tools are actually working on adding AI, and if they're not, you're probably not
Mhm.
working with the best product, or maybe it's really, really niche industry. But um, hopefully they're providing an interface or they're providing the AI, and it will be coming out even if it's not out already. So um, I would just be very hesitant to buy tools because the tool market is changing so fast and there's so much you can do yourself, or there's so much you can do with the AI models out there that maybe you don't even need a tool to at all for a lot of these processes.
Mhm. And you're right. I think of it, even to me, a tool could be a custom GPT, right? And it has the ability to be editable. So as you evolve and as you change, or your customer changes, or the trends change, you can adapt and kind
Mhm.
of just refigure. So you're in control of that tool. And so
Yeah.
you can easily manipulate it to kind of go with you in whichever direction you choose. And that is a leg up versus a kind of a one size fits all. And you have to work with the tool instead of the tool working for you, which is
Yep.
really, really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the other part of that is you're building knowledge in your business
Yes.
that stays in your business and is super valuable. So, everybody's in a niche market pretty much to some degree. And it's like, how are you actually leveraging that niche to actually, expand your market and stuff? Well,
Mhm.
part of that is like having that knowledge in house and being able to be nimble to actually add and change things allows you to be more effective in that process.
Mhm.
That's why, when we talk about what the whole reason we do AI training is because we think that's really important to have that skill in house.
Mhm.
Do should you go out and use third parties like consulting companies to help you implement things? We're not against that at all, but I want you to understand how this
Mhm.
works and what you should and should have for expectations as you're implementing this. And it's critical to be part of the process, to have your teammates part of the process so that you can understand and make changes and be more flexible and actually deliver the right thing at the right time, versus just putting in a tool and letting that run. Now, there's places in the company to do that, but there's also places where that niche is going to give you a big edge at some point, and thinking through that and having the knowledge in house to do that.
Yes. Actually, that comes up in class a lot, especially in our second level class where they're building custom Copilot agents or custom GPTs, because so often in my history, I've been asked to document I mean, you name
Mhm.
it. Companies want you to document everything, but now that documentation actually has value and meaning. So it's like these files that have been in these folders for years and years. It's like, oh my gosh, now we actually have a purpose for all this knowledge that we've acquired over
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And now people are willing to document because they can upload it into these instructions and these GPTs, and now they're giving helpful insights. And so there's
Mhm.
meaning to that knowledge. And that just adds value to the experience as well,
It
which is
it
nice.
it does create the flip side where people are concerned that they've hoarded that information to protect their job. So you do have to work culturally
Mm,
that we want you to do your job more effectively. And the way to do that is to share this information, document this information so that the integration of you and your processes with other people's processes are better and faster and more efficient. And we can take you out of some of the day-to-day work and potentially, let you do more strategic thinking about this, just like your MBA team example, right?
yeah.
So there's a cultural aspect to changing people's perspective on
Hmm.
hoarding information in an organization as well, but it is critical right now.
Yeah. So this is probably my favorite question of the episode. This one people want an answer to. What industries are most at risk of disruption from the generative AI in 2026? Lauren's prediction.
Oh, I was going to give you a non-prediction answer
Oh,
that it's
okay.
everybody. And so I think it's interesting. People talk about, okay, how is a plumber's job going to change with AI? Probably not much. Well, that's true to some degree, but the business of running a plumbing company is going to change drastically, just like every other company. So anybody that has a business that's out there doing something, your business is going to change
Mhm.
to the point where, just like we talked about software development and legal, does your business not model need to change in order to support how AI is impacting that?
Mhm.
So, honestly, I would say if I had to pick, my top three would be legal is probably number one. Um, I've had a lot of conversations with lawyers, and I think it's a little bit of a scary business to be in at the moment. Um, Software development's probably number two, and what most people's number one has been marketing. And I think what
Mhm.
we're learning is I'll put marketing three just because it probably should still be on the list. But what we've learned is that AI isn't going to replace people doing this, but AI with people augmenting it and smart people running the AI can do a lot, right? And can do it very, very well. And that's really been true for marketing, which has probably been the most applied AI case so far.
Mhm.
And if we put a smart marketing person with the AI and show them how to use it, show them what the value is, they can do really amazing things.
Mhm.
But take the person out of that formula and you have nothing. The AI by itself is not very useful. It's the person using it, knowing how to use it effectively for what comes up in that process that actually adds value.
It's interesting. That category or that industry is very creative in
Mhm.
nature, right? They have good taste. They know they have their finger on the pulse of what's trending, what people like, so there is a very important human connection to it's almost the art and science of marketing, right?
And I would actually say for all three of those. So a lawyer, I would say, is very creative, and that's a little bit different sense, but they're writing and they're trying to figure out how to articulate something very clearly, right? And
Yeah,
so the same applies there. The same applies to software developers. So our roles are changing, and how like we're truly the guide on that process rather
yeah.
than having to do every step of the process. So I think those are probably the industries that are going to have the biggest impact. I will say that I think in the coming year, there are going to be a lot of areas that we haven't thought about very much that are going to get blown away. I don't mean blown away, disappear, but like we're going to have some radical AI tools to actually help a lot. One of those is going to be accounting. So we think when we get
Mhm.
into all the three examples I'm going to give are all much more strategic or more math oriented, data oriented. So I think that the accounting world is actually going to have a huge impact from this. I think like we've been working on a CFO agent for small
Mhm.
businesses that I think that whole world of like strategic analysis, and then the third one that goes with that is we've been working on this kind of team of agents approach for as a board of advisors. And I think as we look at these multi-agent systems, it's going to be way more complex solutions that can be developed with non-technical people potentially. And so that's where it gets exciting of as to like how do I understand this problem and then how do I have all my silos of all the different parts of the problem and now how do I build agents for each of those and now let them talk and figure out how to do this best. Um, Including one of the things we haven't talked about very much, but is going to be a very big thing. I think it's going to be one of the top topics next year is self-improving AI. So there's a lot of work out there on how AI self-improves. But now if we have these multi-agent systems, some of the agents in those systems should only be focused on evaluating and improving to make your systems better. So what you've
Mhm.
developed on your first run, it's not a static system anymore. It has the
Mhm.
potential to actually change and improve as systems change, as your knowledge changes, as the AI learns from the processes it's doing. So I think that's going to be a huge, huge thing coming next year.
So you're not always stuck eating the first pancake. You're telling me there's hope for
Exactly.
better
But
pancakes.
you know what? We're talking about getting started. So I like the first pancake because you get to eat before everybody gets a pancake
Okay, okay.
because nobody else wants it.
That's a positive spin. Well, I want to recap what you had to say because before you started talking, I tried to guess what you were going to say. And I got two out of the three correct. I did guess anything legal, anything software development, but the third one I thought you were going to say that you didn't was healthcare. So many
Oh,
of my conversations with people on the street, they're seeing this use of AI in healthcare in a very positive light. So I'm excited to see that it's helping people in that way too. That was the only one I thought of that you didn't mention.
I think it's interesting. Healthcare is on its own, like it's running on its own time frame to some degree, right? Because there's
Mhm.
regulatory issues that are slowing it down.
Mm.
But what they're working on, like they've been working on this a long time, and it is having a huge impact in on healthcare in a positive way for the most part. So
Mhm.
I think it's very interesting. That will definitely change. It's not the same where like your doctor's not going away anytime soon.
No.
Right. So
Mhm.
but it's going to have a big impact. What I think is interesting, there are things out there in healthcare that are like you go see your doctor now and maybe they don't have to take notes. It's listening and
Mhm.
it's actually recording everything and then it'll do the notes. Well, my wife's in medical and when she sees patients, it takes a long time at the end of the day to actually type up all your notes and everything. And a lot of that can be done automatically now by AI, which is quite a powerful tool to actually help the doctor be more focused on talking to the patient and
Mhm.
more integrated with the patient, right? And I think this goes back to what do we want to walk away from our job every day? We want to feel good that we did something, and doctors want to spend more time talking to the patient and figuring out the solution, rather than typing up notes and making sure that they did the notes right and charting and all that. So it's like the more focused we can be on the tasks that actually make us good at our job. That's really where we want to spend the time with AI to get there.
Yeah. That also is a hint at what the prompt of the week is. There's a
Excellent.
recurring theme here. We're almost there. Last question before prompt of the week. How transparent should companies be with their customers about how they're using AI or if they're using AI? I'm noticing on a lot of the chatbots, it's telling me what platform is kind of behind the scenes, what's running it. I see a lot of the sparkle everywhere. Anytime you see the sparkly icon, that usually is a nod to AI. So what should we consider in communication with our customers?
Well, I think we touched on this one or two podcasts ago a
Mhm.
little bit, but one of the challenges is if you have a third party product Like it's one thing we know what the agreements are with the big AI companies, and those get reviewed. They get drilled into pretty good from legal teams all over constantly. So anytime that changes, you kind of know what's going on. The question I have is what happens when it's a small software product that you've implemented and now they've added some AI capability? What are they doing? How are they doing this? How are they securing your information in that process? I've been in lots of legal calls with companies that a third party took their data and did something and with AI that they weren't like it was not part of their agreement initially. And sometimes that was a big deal and sometimes it wasn't a big deal, but where's your data going and knowing where that's happening? It's usually the smaller software products that you don't know that. Well, flip that around. Now, if you have customers, what are you doing with your data, your customers' data, and how are you handling that? And are you educating your team members about what they should and
Mhm.
shouldn't do, right? So we actually signed a new agreement a couple weeks ago, and it forced us to change our rules a little bit, how we're using AI.
Mhm.
So we had to send out, you got a message that said, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do
Mhm.
with any customer information, right? So I think it's interesting. We have to be aware of this, but put yourself in the other shoes. If it was a third party that you were hiring, you'd want to know certain things. What would you want to know, and what's critical for you to make a decision? You want to make sure you're providing your customers that information. So when they work with you, they know and trust what you're going to do or not, and not going to do with this information. And then you need to train your
Mhm.
team to do that.
Right, right. Yeah, I think trust is a big component. Anytime something is new or different, and there's people who are at different levels of understanding, I think anytime you can build some trust around it, it's just makes for a better experience and going
Yep.
forward.
Yep.
Okay, finally,
Fantastic. Are we on to prompt
finally.
of the week?
I hope I haven't built this up too much and then people are going to be disappointed. But this is just a prompt that I've been playing with and including in some of the building of custom GPTs. And I want to kind of set the stage. So imagine you're a manager and part of your job is to give feedback, right? So you've got employees within your team. They're either sending you PowerPoints or emails or documents, contracts, that type of thing, and there's a lot of need for feedback, which can really slow down the process on both ends, right? And so, a way to kind of alleviate some of those time constraints and the back and forth is start capturing good and bad examples of work. And that's as simple as it is. You have a category for good, a category for bad. Even create a Word document with two columns, good, bad. And you can use that as data to upload into a custom GPT or even a prompt and really have it kind of create this scope of which you like and what you don't like. So you can add to the prompt and kind of define your role. Say, my job as the human is to create new drafts of this work. Your job as ChatGPT is to evaluate my draft against the good and bad examples and give structured feedback on how close I am to the quote unquote good standard. So, where I'm seeing this in action is managers are sharing these GPTs with their team. The team is told to kind of run their documents through this GPT prior to sending them to their manager. Now, on both sides, I'm seeing people really enjoying this process because the manager gets a high quality document that they basically can sign up and keep the ball rolling. Now, the people on the other end are really enjoying it because it's this judgment-free zone of feedback. They want to do well, they want to do the right thing, but we don't always know exactly what the right thing or the good example is. So they're able to kind of do this iterative process behind the scenes, and then it's just speeding up the whole process. So great use case of a little bit of feedback using your data, your knowledge to kind of build up this filter, if you will, that can really elevate the work that's being done on both sides, and it's a time saver. So you
Mhm.
don't have to wait for somebody to return an email or find a time where you can both meet. This is something that can kind of be done um, on each other's time, and it just expedites the process really quickly. So great use case of ChatGPT, kind of almost a workflow, if you will.
Mhm.
But we all need that really good feedback and that stamp of approval to get that document sent out. I use good and bad examples in so many ways. That's one of my
Mhm.
favorite tricks.
I think that's interesting because as people get deeper and deeper in this, and if they need to build out a custom model, this is the
Hmm.
starting point for doing that. The other thing I'll tell you, everything Angela just said, in her class, she teaches about how to structure projects like this, which is
Hmm.
also a critical piece because if you're going to build out shared solutions where your team is going to use like a custom GPT or an agent or workflow,
Hmm.
you need to figure out how to share all this information. So I think it's so interesting that everything we talk about builds on itself to get to the next step, but that's really
Hmm.
true when it comes to this, and this is a great prompt for that process.
And it's an easy one for people to start with who don't have a lot of experience communicating with generative AI because they don't I feel sometimes there's a bit of paralysis when they go to prompt. It's like they
Hmm.
don't know what to say. And so here's an example of you don't really need to say much, but if you have these examples that you can upload, then the prompt becomes simpler because you're adding the content and the context as an image or as a document. So less pressure on the prompting then, if
Yep.
necessary. So,
Yep.
well, good. Well, I hope everybody tries that one. Start capturing your good and bad work samples going forward. Today, we looked at AI strategy as a marathon. We had the starting line, the long miles, the finish line, but just know it isn't a sprint. It's endurance, it's discipline, it's vision. So, any last takeaways, Lauren, before we end today?
I'll just say this. So our goal is to get you started, and we want you to start because as you start, you will learn and develop and figure out the solution. Uh, we have quite a few courses we offer, but our 101 class, um, the first person from any company that signs up, we do it for free. And we have these classes in Minneapolis quite often. We have them in Orlando periodically. Our 101 co-pilot class is held online, so you can do this anywhere. So if you want to participate with us, just reach out, send an email to hello@modelmind.ai, and just say that you want to sign up for that. You can also go out to our website to find more information about what we're going to be covering and how that whole program works. But we want you to learn so that you can be more effective with AI and actually take advantage of some of these capabilities and the big efficiencies that we can gain by applying AI. Again, it's not going to always happen on your first project that's going to be super valuable, but you have to take these steps to continue to get deeper and learn more. So that's why we do these podcasts. That's why we do our trainings. But our goal is to help come alongside you to actually help do that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well done. Well, with that, thank you for listening and thank you for being part of the conversation. Until next time, keep asking the questions that move your business forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being part of the conversation with Model Mind AI. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and stay curious.